I tend to be a person who starts drug user groups. So I was going to just briefly outline that and say, I moved to Vancouver with 3 little kids. I was on welfare. I lived in a housing co-op that happened to be next to a fire hall, and it was sirens, sirens, sirens. We had a huge peak in overdoses and a massive outbreak of HIV. And my mother had always taught me that if you want to do anything in the community, go to the people who are most affected by it and you start organizing them directly. So it wasn't really my fault that I'm a drug user organizer. And then, so we did that from about 1993, and VANDU was formed and funded, but it wasn't initially very funded. So I found that my method of organizing, which was again an imitation of my mother, I didn't know I was going to do mother worship on here, but so when I meet the drug users, I would invite them over to the housing co-op, and I had this 3-bedroom, you know, you could roller skate through they're big units. They were built in the 80s. I don't know, you construction people know. They're built tiny places now. And so I would have them over and, you know, make tea or whatever. And it very gradually started to realize that they were street drug users and they had never been invited into anybody's home who had little children. Like this kind of, oh yes, we're going to start a nonprofit society, or, you know, this kind of methodology. So I think that is a startling thing, and it creates that kind of, there's no funding involved, there were no government grants at that point. And of course, you do try to get those kind of things. So that was the sort of spirit at which I approached my work. So you don't really need funding. It's nice to have a living room to do it in. But I felt like I was the welfare queen in the sense that the single people on welfare got very, very tiny checks. And my check looked huge compared to theirs. Plus, I'm in subsidized housing, so I wasn't having to spend every single dime on rent, which you would now, for sure. They do not. The welfare rates are so low, they should be charged with a crime. And it would really be worth at least saying, okay, well, let's just, if we don't want to do a big giveaway because that upsets people, fine, let's just go back to what proportionally you would get in the 70s now for welfare. And it's a substantial thing because you have not kept up anywhere close to inflation, which I guess I don't need to remind people in this room. So I said, I have a hypothesis now, after 30 years of doing this, that if a community does not have a drug user group, they're not going to get shit. And they might get shit, but they're not going to keep it. So that's my, it won't be sustained. So the advantages of a drug user group is that they persist always, and they take little or no funding, because I've done it with no funding on welfare, just using my, like I'm a crazy cheap person, but I always figure if I can't have a meeting and have 30 people in the room and give each one of them $5 and I'm on welfare, come on, Ann, you can get that money off somebody. You know, it's just not a lot of money. And if you can get the room rental for free, so it's about churches and libraries, and mostly not churches, but I'm so glad that something good's happening in a church. So the other one is that they have the higher moral ground. Right now, you look at the data and you say, hi, I'm a drug user. We've got a drug user union and we're demanding that we are citizens of this country. We have been identified as a group of people who have a disability. We have an illness. We're not getting medical treatment and they're really, really wanting to put us in jail. There is nobody that you will meet that doesn't say that's the higher moral ground. What are they going to defend? Arresting people who are sick? Are they going to defend not giving proper citizenship to people who were born in Canada? Ironically, many of them had their land stolen, you know, I mean, they're really, really from Canada. So anyway, so I think the higher moral ground's good, and then they're drug user groups are inherently political, because anything you go to do, you run up against politics. So if you're acting as a group of volunteers, then what do? You go to city council. That's what citizens do. And you say, or you go to the police board and you say the cops are beating our people up, or these arrests aren't making any sense, and the police are arresting people just so they can get overtime hours, and we're encouraging the worst kind of policing with the kind of policies we have, and you need to look at that. You know, all of the things that you go to do are inherently political, and you're not like service providers, which are service provision is extremely costly. To run a not even 12-hour-a-day outdoor smoke tent is $1 million per year, because I wrote the proposals for them and then got denied them, just saying, if you've read them. It's a BC bids process, and it's not their fault that it costs that much, because they always say this much staffing, these wages, blah, blah, blah. So, but it is important that the public really understand how much things cost, and it puts service providers in a whole different category, because they can't really piss off people and lose their funding, because they've got people that are employed by them who have mortgages to pay and children, and they should be respected as service providers. But a drug user group, that's a whole different beast, just saying. So they're inherently political, you know, whatever it is. Right now we're fighting hospital stuff, and the doctors, oh my God, who knew? The Doctors for Safer Drug Policy just showed up. So the disadvantage of drug user groups is that we fight like hell, and people who use drugs who are seen as criminals or bad guys or amoral or weak and blah, 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 you know the shit stuff. Then they become heroic community volunteers, and they put up a tent, and they persist there, and they're willing to get arrested. That's like, anyway, they don't always get arrested, and we can't always get in court. But Dolph's a good example. Everyone keep your eyes on Dolph. For this court case coming up is going to be very, very important. So I've run like 9 tents over many, many periods. I could never get arrested. I'm just saying, not that I was so eager when my kids were little to get arrested, but I'm just saying they don't want the case to go to court because they know we're going to win in court. And if not, how could we not win in court? We have the higher moral ground. Oh, yeah. You're just going to leave people to die in an alley. So anyway, that's been, okay. Then the disadvantage is that when we do this, we demand that public health adopt these as public health policies, fund NGOs, which are never the user groups, and then they implement harm reduction, and now that person has become a client who doesn't obey the rules. The same person who was in that tent heroically designing, meeting every day, doing it for free, you know what I mean? So this is an interesting phenomena that we face. So that's a disadvantage of the user group phenomena, and I think we need to look at that, just saying. And then the other comparison that I like to make, because there's a lot of recovery stuff here, and I've been to 1,000 I wasn't the alcoholic, but I was married to one for many years, and I went to thousands of AA meetings, open ones, you know, the ones you're allowed to go to. And then, but what occurs to me is that these movements both evolved from people being criminals. Now, if you were an alcoholic in the United States during Prohibition, you were a criminal. Especially if you were poor, you were definitely arrested. And if you were poor and black, you were definitely arrested. You know, it was all this dealing and gangsters. You know, it was a tremendously criminalized movement. So even being a drinker wasn't just that you were an immoral, weak person who had no, you know, willpower. You were actually a criminal. And they had criminal records. I mean, it just occurred to me one day. And then I realized that both movements, to the drug user group movement and the recovery movement or 12-step or whatever, they had to buck a system. My understanding that the treatment for alcoholism was that you had to go to this sanitarium for, crazy people or whatever they called them, sort of a madhouse model, and then they would force you to drink every day. And these guys said this didn't work for them, so they had this whole Oxford group thing. I mean, it was a resistance against well, I don't know if they had to fight off criminalization. They certainly had to fight off their own crushed lives because of criminalization and being viewed as criminals. And that is a huge parallel between when alcohol was made illegal and drugs made illegal. And the other thing that I think is another parallel is they're both run by volunteer governance structures, and they can run with almost no money. Like, yeah, just fund us and see what happens. They've disfunded us before and saw what happened, and we just kept going. Drug user groups can keep operating, especially, the first iteration I was saying, they came to my living room. They all had my home number. I mean, they'd have to find a phone, but they knew where I lived. They could buzz my buzzer. And so it was a different thing than saying, well, how you have to set healthy boundaries and you're not allowed to have your clients come to your home, and I don't know, you service provider people must know more about this than me. I just know that those things are tossed around, and these are often done for very good reasons, because someone might be exploiting someone to, do work for less than minimum wage or even sexual exploitation. We won't get into that too much because of the 13 stepping. But anyway, so my complaint, here's my complaint. They keep saying that recovery's over here and drug user groups are encouraging drug use. And when I get mad enough with the recovery people, it was Giuseppe. Does everyone know who this guy is? Anyway, I said, look, I'm a mother on welfare. I put up a tent in the downtown east side. We said this is a smoke tent and an injection site because fentanyl hit in 2016, and that's what we did. Why don't you come and put a tent in the alley right there and put recovery on it? And it was all, well, I'm not going to give up my recovery. I might get triggered. I'm going, or, oh, I've got children. I said, I've got children? Like, I'm the worst, I could be the worst mother in the world. I've missed a lot of birthdays, just saying. But anyway, the other thing is that because we also need this relationship. If I don't want people to relapse, oh my God, I'm a terrible drug user. I've never succeeded at using drugs. I'm not encouraging people to use drugs. I know the cost. It's absolutely startling to someone who's never really been up close with a drug user or an alcoholic or whatever, someone who's got substance use disorder, to just see how much of their life they will give away for that being high. That is the most valuable thing. And it's a hard thing to finally just get to the point in your life where you go, people either use drugs or they don't. And you have no emotion either way, which is still challenging to me sometimes. But most of the time I go, oh yeah, they either use drugs or they don't. And you need to be that detached, or you're secretly working in the background and setting yourself up for disappointment or kind of a subtle cruelty towards that person because they've disappointed you. But I think that within the recovery movement, people can become extremely ashamed that they're relapsing. And what I want to say to them is, here's my card for a safe relapse, call Ann. And then I would take them to a drug user group and say, for God's sake, don't buy dope from someone you don't know, and don't use it alone, which is exactly what you will do if you're trying to hide the fact that you had a relapse. The good old days of nice private little relapses, except for alcoholics who can do it, is over. They will find you dead. And so and I think that people, the recovery movement's losing as many people as we're losing, in the drug user group movement, which is sort of human rights for drug users and ending the prohibition against these drugs, which not everyone necessarily is going to agree on. So I think, and I do think that's the goal, we tinker with these molecules. They're going to keep making some new, deadly, worse molecule, and then they're going to make another worse, deadly molecule. And if you haven't been following this is what's going on. And at some point, it's like alchemy. It's like those fairy tales where they take the straw and he spins it into gold. You can just take a bunch of molecules and make a ton of money. And so I finally did some math the other day. So this is my math. 99 pounds, 42 kilograms of drugs that could kill you are sold every single day on the streets of British Columbia, just British Columbia. That's $1.6 billion market per year, and that's this huge underestimate. So I want people to argue with me because I don't want to get caught by some right-wing asshole who tells me I did my math wrong. 225,000 people spend $20 per day on dope. We know crystal meth's cheap, or I think it is. I don't buy it, but I'm just, it's my sense. And other drugs can be much more expensive. But if you do that, who spends $20 a day on drugs? Tons of people spend way more. And in that, I'm including the recreational, the 100,000, and the 125,000 non-recreational, maybe daily dependent. So I think it's a huge underestimate. But that's what we need to keep telling the public. So as you're worried about these, I don't know, dillies or whatever the hell's flying around out there, and honestly, do they not know that Pill Corner's been called Pill Corner for 25 years? Everyone's bought and sold pills long before something called safe supply, which is evidently killing people. And I don't know, the political narrative on this is absolutely bonkers. So anyway, here's my dream. They didn't ask me to do this, but I heard them having their dream. So make me queen bitch of the world. I'll tell you, I want a coalition of people who keep moving forward with in the good political times. So when we get the OPSs, that they actually open, and we're like pushy. They announced OPSs. When they said they were going to do involuntary treatment, I said? They'll never do it. They never did OPSs when they announced them. Like, are you kidding me? Coquitlam, no OPS. I don't know, name it, Burnaby. I don't even know if Burnaby has one or not. I hate to be wrong too much, especially in public. But, you know, there's tons and tons and tons of places. The reason there's an OPS in Nanaimo, and they're here, raise your hands, Nanaimo people. This is the Nanaimo Area Network of Drug Users. Nanaimo is a death zone. We get very little. We have a tiny amount of funding. We meet at the library. But for the most part, these guys heroically took over. We rented a car lot with a little office, and I said, it's the only place I can find it was really cheap, and I just figured we'd have an office. And within a day or two, we had 100 people, or within a month, or I don't know how long, 100 people a day, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when we shut that, of course, the RCMP call up the owner of the land and threaten him with civil forfeiture. This is another whole topic. We need to do a whole thing on civil forfeiture. And he wouldn't release to us, but we were there for a full year. And when we shut down, the overdoses in Nanaimo doubled, and they had already opened the $1 million one. That was only open from 11 till 8:30. It's still only open 11 to 8:30, which just burns my ass. So when we get an OPS, we all need to push to say, you can't shut an OPS at 8:30 at night. You know what I mean? To do that kind of, just keep going that extra mile and keep the pressure on and keep the pressure on in the good times. That's when we're getting funding. And as Guy, where are you, Guy? Guy's got doomsday politics coming towards us. Well, we basically have the same strategy in the good times and the bad times, which is persist, persist, persist. So a strategy to confront and condemn the endless increases to police budgets. I don't know if you're noticing this. They always get an increase. And when they take money and give it to the police, it means there's less money for recreation for our children. And, you know, anyway, it's really true. And and they've never not, the Vancouver City Council one year denied an increase to the Vancouver Police Department. They went to the Solicitor General, and he told the City Council, City of Vancouver, had to give them the increase. And I thought, well, who is in charge of the police then? It's not clear to me, and it's worse when it's the RCMP. In Nanaimo, it's the RCMP never met with us once, ever, not once. And there's been a version of NANDU for 5 years. And we ask all the time, bylaws won't meet with us. We get these strange kind of, you know, it's kind of like an ick factor. Somehow they're going to catch something if they meet with us. So anyway, that's my dream, is that we start to really have a political strategy where we're saying, what is our education strategy? What's our media strategy? What's our community organizing strategy? Because the legal strategy and the advocacy, it gets old. At some point, you really need to follow up on every single case of someone being kicked out of a hospital by a security guard at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's never a good idea. I don't know who invented this idea. And if they get a complaint every single time, you'll see changes. And that's what persistence is. That's the little user group that could. We just keep going and going and going. So anyway, the bigger picture is also, as part of this strategy, that the public knows where their money's going. Their money is being squandered now. If you even look at the Canadian, it's Health Canada money. It's the strategic plan for drugs, or whatever, the strategic plan for drugs federally. I've got the letters wrong. But most of that money went to enforcement. I was just shocked. 8% went to harm reduction. And then we have to listen to this prattle about harm reduction's overfunded and they're encouraging drug use. Meanwhile, the money really has gone to police, and that's Health Canada. That's not even the police budget, which is a whole other thing. So when we need that real way we can share this information with ourselves and with each other and make either beautiful little films, whatever really, really works, and memes. And so I'll use social, I don't know how to do any of that stuff, but I know it's extremely, extremely effective. But if we don't have, this is my thing. I want the recovery people at the table. I want the drug user people at the table. We'll put up with the service providers as long as they behave. And you know, because you don't want a group of people there saying, don't do that because we might lose our funding. We have to dream big and be bold and have that strategy not interfered with by the consideration about whether you're going to lose funding. Because I don't know if you've noticed, we can suck up all we like and we'll still lose funding. Some things that we can't control, we need to sort of just say, oh, we're beyond constantly reacting to and putting out small fires, and we've got a bigger plan because we need to get these drugs regulated. They will not stop poisoning. as far as I can tell. I've been at it a long, long time, and I think people who don't believe that yet, that should be part of our education strategy. People should be able to say, oh no, I don't think that's right. And we should be able to go back to heroin, go back to cocaine, and say, you know, if given the choice, what would you do? And we don't know what people would do, because they just basically take whatever drugs they can buy on the street. And that's the real hell of it. The 100 pounds a day, $42 million a day, $1.6 billion a year, and that's what the public needs to know is completely unworkable, and those people don't get arrested. It's huge crystal meth lab. Did you notice there was no criminal charges? None. Not one that I've heard of anyway. And the same thing with the big fentanyl lab in near Kamloops, and then there's a fentanyl lab in northern Alberta. You know, these are massively large. I kept saying, how much is 5 tons of crystal meth? Would it fill like this? Like, how big is that? You know what I mean? This is where we need to really capture the imagination and understanding of the public to see what they're up against. Thank you very much. This is a lovely thing to bring people together, and this is part of the solution.